So, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Method Made podcast, where we discuss tech transfer challenges in the pharmaceutical industry. Today, I'm joined by Jeffrey. How are you doing today, Jeff?
I'm good, Nikos. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Jeff, I'm excited to talk to you today because you have experience in CMC, the sort of overarching regulatory framework that tech transfer sort of sits inside. And I would love to just sort of to start with today, discuss what exactly is CMC for, founders, scientists at early stage companies who might be looking ahead.
Yeah, that's a good question. If you're specific, so I guess there's like an industry standard definition, and if you use it up, it's like this massive complex definition. And if you're not in that headspace, it's kind of tricky to understand, right? But simply put, if you're asking me or if anyone approached me, because I get asked this all the time, right, by friends and colleagues, like, what is CMC? What is that? What is it? I'm like, oh, it's this is what it is. It's like what I do. And believe it or not, when I started in industry, in operations, like it was so heavily relied on by our clients, and I didn't even know what it was. Like I remember asking, like, what is this, right? And then it was explained to me. I'm like, oh, it's actually not that complicated. So to me, if you're asking, CMC, it's kind of like the control and oversight of manufacturing. Everything that kind of encompasses manufacturing from CDMO space or in-house space, R&D tech space, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of that bubble that governs the quality aspect to manufacturing. And it's basically a wheelhouse to manage your controls and ensure that you're having like quality output of products and materials.
Okay, that is a comprehensive definition. So something I'd be interested in to sort of get into next is, how does tech transfer fit into CMC?
Yeah, that's a great question. When drug product or drug substance, those products are being conceptualized, developed, they kind of get developed in these small scale phases, right? Everyone thinks that if you're not immersed in the technology when it comes to pharma development, everyone believes it's like this clear pathway, but it just doesn't work that way, right? In R&D, there's issues, scale-up design, there's issues, all these problems with manufacturing. I would say where tech transfer really leads all of that is bridging conceptual design to R&D to commercial manufacturing. So anything that gets scaled up that needs a robust process from a large vessel size, large reactor size, like real deal, kind of matching patient output and units manufactured, right? Anything that matches that, tech transfer sits right in the middle of that and basically bridges all that knowledge transfer and knowledge gap, right? So we make sure that we have equipment that matches the scale. Do we have the right type of parameters set? Our documentation in check? If we gave it to someone else to process, is it robust enough that a new operator can kind of execute that? Are we looking at it from a continuous kind of improvement standpoint, continuous process validation, reassessment, right? So tech transfer really sits in that bubble where we're really making sure that the documentation is good for commercial processing and streamlining, right? So we're right at the end of process development, kind of bridging that, working with them to make sure that that process is scalable and transferable to a larger operational space. And then we're also, tech transfer is also involved in making sure that the process is set up for a strategic validation standpoint, right? Because in the commercial space, we still make clinical drug products, engineering type batches, etc. Whatever you need, but we really are making sure that that process can commercialize if the data suggests that it's going to go in that direction, right? If your phase 3 trials pass, you're getting your registration product up, getting it made, getting it up on stability. Tech transfer is really pushing everything over, and they're bridging all that information to the commercial ops team. So a lot of those fundamentals of like making sure those boxes are ticked and all those errors are checked off, a lot of that happens in tech transfer, believe it or not, as we're getting the information from R&D and facilitating it. And it is kind of odd that you're seeing almost like a project jump between 3 groups, right? Jumping from development to tech transfer to engineering to commercial, but all these departments help out, right? And it's it's, there's time sensitivity to it, but it just takes time to make sure everything's done properly.
Yeah. So it sounds sort of like a large part of CMC is also, you mentioned planning and sort of setting this up so that, if the data is as, it goes well, that you could actually commercialize that. So yeah, I'm curious, like at a high level, what sorts of considerations there might be when you're looking ahead there.
Well, typically there's a roadmap, right? And you're not just working with one individual planning all this stuff out. That's a really important thing, right? That we do depend on a lot of teamwork and a lot of cross-functional kind of teamwork, organizational skill sets, and we manage that together to get all this stuff done, right? Now, manufacturing is just one part of it, right? The chemistry is also important. So analytical development is still crucial to manufacturing success, and then ensuring we have the right types of documentation in place from a quality assurance perspective to kind of get everything moved along and to file it properly, to get the licenses, to get the operational capacity up there. All those three things really work together. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
Okay. Yeah, so thinking about the sort of product life cycle, where, like when tech transfer doesn't go well, and say when documentation isn't necessarily done as well as it could be, where does the CMC strategy sort of suffer the most? Like, where do you see that?
Well, I mean, it's called strategy for a reason, right? We try to execute strategy the best that we can, and that's like basically the wheelhouse of project management when it comes to the CDMO space and pharma development space. So strategy is always there in the background, but every project that I've worked on, everything is a very agile approach, right? Especially new projects, especially new documentation, new batches coming in, new projects. So we work very, very closely with these R&D groups to make sure that we're being agile enough that we can switch and pivot, right? And we don't have everything planned out, all of the risks kind of, issued in some sort of register, and we're checking that on a daily basis. But what we are doing is, effectively making sure that we're making a quality product and we can get through the crucial steps of that process, right? I mean, not having I would just say what it really comes down to is time, to be honest, Nico. If you don't have enough time to prepare yourself and everything is rushed, that's when everything falls apart, right? Because you're not going to be able to really have any time to buffer to make a strategic change or to put something on hold and try something else out. You're really pushing your team. So interpersonally, that's just stressing people out to it's like, well, our quote has issued. Do you have 2 months? Well, we had another project on that piece of equipment, so now you guys have 2 weeks to get this thing up and running. And we told the client it's going to be due by this time. So out of R&D in 2 weeks, we're going to process that in 48 hours, and then try to get the methods done in that whole amount of time. Let it hold, and yeah, we don't understand anything that's going to happen to that stuff if we leave it. So keep on rush. To me, that's when your strategy falls apart. If you're just racing, and you're not taking your time to have a think and to have those proper discussions to make sure that everything is lining up and you're checking those boxes, I think that's when your strategy becomes very near zero, and you're not really running on a strategy anymore. You're kind of trying to be successful with your fingers crossed. I mean, I think we all know that never works.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something that's come up before, and especially in the context of sort of venture backed companies and the sort of pressures of investor pressures to execute on certain timelines. And it sounds like, I don't know if you've seen this or in your experience, that sometimes that can be sort of something that really doesn't work well in that context.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I've seen that happen actually just recently, because I kind of ended up in the startup space in around, I think, 2021. And that's when I really started understanding kind of how that world worked a little bit. And, I was on boards before. I was on a few boards, so I had a little bit of training on governance and that sort of thing. But I think what's important in those situations when you're working with VCs and your board is changing and it's growing and they're taking, they're increasing their stakes in the company. I think it's important to have diversity on the board, right? You need, if you're dealing with scientific or analytical or any sort of data-driven kind of innovation, I think you should have someone on the board, or someone on the team of the VCs who's funding your program to like have a little bit of an idea, understanding of what's going on there, right? I don't think it's a good idea to have a lot of academics and bankers on that board, right? Because all they're looking at the end of the day is, are you hitting your milestone? You're saying, well, no, we have all these issues, and you could back it up with everything that's coming out of your contractors to tell them we actually are running out of runway, and this is why. They're like, yeah, but why aren't you making that date? I want to know why you're not making that date. Like, well, I can make it if I have more money. So it's this, you get in the situation of this back and forth arguing, like time versus money, time versus money. And on the startup side, that if you're starting your own organization, or I would call it if you're on the client side of it, that happens frequently on that side. But on the development side, the CDMO space, like that's project management 101. It's like time and money, time and money.
Yeah.
So both sides are not arguing, but they're having discussions about the same topics, right? So I think that's what it kind of comes down to, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you'd sort of advocate for sort of operational experience on like at least interfacing with the board level on a more maybe regular, having some sort of operational experience at least within their immediate vicinity on a more frequent level.
Yeah, I mean, I would even downgrade it a little bit. I would say having at least one SME in science, in tech, or at least understanding how a large scale project kind of unfolds would be beneficial to kind of understanding how much runway you have, right? And the financials, they directly feed into, like I said before, the aspect of time, which feeds directly into the aspect of development work, and then that just onboards right into commercialization. So it really does impact it all.
Okay. So something I'd be curious to kind of talk about a bit is about like you mentioned agility and flexibility, and it seems that in sort of R&D environments, you really need the most of that sort of agility and flexibility. And how does that sort of change as you're moving through into like a GMP environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, you should always have like a pretty good level of control of everything. I think if you don't have experienced people working on a program, then chaos ensues, and nothing's under anyone's control. So yeah, that understanding from that perspective is helpful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious about so something that's come up a lot is the sort of language problem, especially in sort of technical documentation in these tech transfers. And I'd be curious to hear your perspective on this. If you see this coming up a lot, maybe different technical jargon or assumptions that might be made on the sort of sending side, from a scientist who's developed a process towards like the sort of manufacturing environment.
Yeah, for sure. So in industry, nothing's really taken for granted. Everything needs to be ironed out in advance, right? So yeah, there'll be like a ton of acronyms, these sorts of things, right? I don't typically feel like in technical documents there is a lot of jargon, because it needs to be streamlined and robust enough for anyone to kind of pick up, like I mentioned earlier, right? So in order to make sure that all of the understanding is in one place, what I've always seen happening in the background is teams basically like meet in advance to make sure that one process from a scaled down approach is transferable and able to be scaled up, right? Like if you have to, this is how I think about it. If someone from R&D or development services designing a process, like, would you write a report on that and sign it and give it to some senior person on the next level of the project that would understand everything, right? Like, can you do that? And if you're not confident doing that, then we just work together to make sure that's all done. So really, yeah, the jargon is kind of eliminated because they are very technical in nature, and everything is funneling towards these like regulatory bodies, which, they prefer things to be written in a certain way. So jargon's eliminated, things are streamlined as much as possible, and just bridging those two departments' processes is, I would say, probably the most important thing. But yeah, we don't just, one department doesn't write a certain way and the other one does it another way. We try to streamline the approach so we're all kind of doing it the same way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so I'm curious, do you think that having, like you mentioned, bringing everyone together, um, does having everyone in the same room facilitate that? Like when you've got, the quality people from one side, quality people from the other, process development, and so on.
Yeah, we try to get everyone in around the same table for sure, but it depends on the conversation, right? Um, there's normally a lot of different meetings and types of discussions, just depending on the nature of the program, right? Series come up, ad hoc meetings come up, um, but for but for larger meetings, I mean, the ones that are important that require a lot of attention to very specific needs of a program, they're highly focused. The attendance is broad but structured, so the subject matter expertise is kind of diverse throughout both organizations. And yeah, we just make sure that everything that's kind of on the agenda for that discussion is basically being taken care of. So from both sides, if there's a quality item, do we have quality people from both sides, et cetera?
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so one thing that I've sort of heard with the documentation in pharma is that it's uh, it's still in many cases like paper based. I'm curious if you have a perspective on sort of digitization, and whether that's yeah, whether you're seeing that and sort of where that's at in the industry.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I don't think everyone has that system set up yet, but it is starting to kind of become more popular, and we're seeing it a lot more. A lot of places still operate on a paper document, and that's okay. I mean, there's just company priorities, right? Where they want to invest in and where they're putting the time in. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a good thing to have documents digitized, but if they're working, I mean, why fix it? Like, why break it and fix it again when you don't
Mhm.
have to? And it's also about like getting data to kind of facilitate that change, right? So yeah, we have paper. I mean, everywhere I've pretty much spent my time, we've had paper documents. And if you want to make the change, how I was looking at it is just like, well, where's your data to show that you need that change, right? Because the investment's going to be X. What's your justification for that? Like, why can't people just work off the paper documents? Now, I think people have improved, I guess, a tiny bit when it comes to like signatures. So lots of folks are implementing electronic signatures, be it like scanning, paper copy or hard copies back, or having specific type of enablements on DocuSign to make it compliant with the regulatory bodies.
Mhm.
So, I mean, those types of approaches are great, right? Because when you're waiting for an approval, like you need it immediately or you need it in the next couple of minutes, that approach is super helpful. If you're walking around a document, I mean, you're going to do put it on top of a pile of like documents that needs to get signed. How are you going to get that done? It's very, very old school. So I think at least if people are kind of digitizing signatures, I think
Yeah.
I think that needs to happen everywhere immediately if you're not doing that. But full batch records, I mean, it just depends on the organization, right? How they do things, how they manufacture, what their preference is for managing those documents, how their quality systems are set up.
Hmm. I was just curious, from the tech transfer side, if having the digital versions, if that makes much of a difference in terms of their just like accessibility, readability, just being able to get through it.
Well, I would say that technically every document generated is electronic based. I mean, from, you know, managing this department now at Eurofins, it's like everything has a master template and our unit operations are organized and we evaluate them, right? We look at the engineering we make based on what's been happening through, quality systems or quality system management, effectiveness checks, any open actions. Like, we're constantly reviewing those unit operations and then we standardize those in digitized templates. So we evaluate those quite often and we use those for like everything that we do here with small changes based on equipment, etc. So all the writing, all the sharing, all the review, that's all electronic. It's just execution.
Mhm.
um, like I said, because retrofitting operations with all these digitized systems and computer screens, like, it's just, where's the justification of doing that immediately for everything?
Yeah.
So execution, yes. Most of the time, it can still be hard copy. Everything else is digital, though. I don't, and everything can be reviewed digitally once scanned. So I think we're getting a lot better. But full digitization, I haven't worked at a ton of places who or haven't seen that being done everywhere yet. So I think it's a slow burn for that still.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like there just isn't necessarily that financial incentive for it. Like, it doesn't really sound like it's much of a business priority.
No, I think the next thing that's probably going to happen, I think that's going to get completely bypassed, and we're just going to move to like complete automation, where batch records will just be programmed into the hardware,
Mhm.
and that type of mechanism is just running, right?
Yeah.
And someone's just running that from a control room. Maybe they'll have the document in front of them, but that's just going to be integrated into the system. Like, do you know what I mean? I think that's probably more on the horizon than digitizing batch records and having operators do it. And I think that just comes down to throughput, right?
Yeah.
How much volume do we have to have? Okay, get that equipment in there, validate it, get the documentation programmed into that machine, and just like run as much as you can. That's how I see it.
Well, I think there's sort of two ways people think about this digitizing documentation. One is like what we were talking about earlier, where I've heard it described as like glass on paper or paper on glass, where it's
Okay.
basically a paper. You're still filling. It's essentially you're going through the same action just on an iPad instead of on a paper. But I think
Yeah.
what you're describing with the automation is that this whole writing process is automated. It's not a writing activity anymore.
Exactly. I think that's where I'm trying to get at with all of this. That's why, going back to what I said previously, like what's the value of having a document on an iPad? Like to me, it's not really digitizing. Like, yeah, the text is now like in a digital, like on digital hardware, whatever. Still gotta check that. Someone's gotta check it. Someone's gotta write on it. Um, that still needs to happen. So I don't really think that you're saving a lot of time executing by doing that, right? I think maybe the next approach is, into more automation and just embedding those instructions directly into the equipment, right? Or whatever automation process you're going to have running, then you're eliminating batch records and it's completely digital.
And from like a business perspective, what's the advantage of having that? Is it speed, reduced risk? What do you get when you have that all sort of automated versus the current sort of status quo?
Yeah, great question. I mean, you have increased sensitivity, you have increased precision and accuracy, you have continuous manufacturing, right? Machines don't complain, they don't get tired, they need maintenance. Maybe, I don't know what the maintenance schedule will be for that, but let's say it's 2 times a year for 2 weeks, right? Month off,
Mm-hmm.
all the machines you're running. So it really, yeah, it comes down to like throughput, operational capacity, and just effectiveness. You can make, crazy compounds that would be unsafe for humans, right? During the manufacturing process, you can put equipment in there that runs it automated, and you have, like process engineers running that from a control room. Massive advantage.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like you would also you don't have to be physically present. So in these situations where you're doing a process which may not be safe for process engineers to actually be physically present in, they can still have visibility into what's actually happening.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna like completely step away from folks being, not on site at all. Like I feel like there needs to be some sort of human interaction there. I mean, we're still prehistoric animals when you really think about it,
Yep.
and we need to be working together in quite some capacity. I think I don't know. I just feel like there might be some concerns, or we haven't really figured out what the next step is. I don't think using like digital online like PLCs to program equipment, doing all these crazy things from your like couch at home is a really good idea, because you're losing so much of like your integration into the business, right? Your connectivity there. So I think that's going to be exciting. I'm not sure how that's going to look in the future, but yeah, human impact on site. I think for what I do, anyways, I think it's still here to stay for a little while, anyways.
All right. Well, it's been super interesting hearing your thoughts. I'd love to hear, as we're sort of wrapping up and getting towards the end, do you have any sort of final thoughts on the implications of tech transfer for CMC success, say for new process development engineers or technical leaders who may have not have that much experience and approaching it for their first time?
Yeah, work with your team, look for the people who have the great ideas, look for the people who are willing to work with you in a collaborative way. there's always good resources online to help you if you're having the challenges. But typically, I mean, if you're working on a project, you're going to have some senior folks on there. So if you haven't been in that space, I feel like you should. If you're not, you should be, but you should be getting a lot of that extra help, right? And if you're really interested in this sort of space in life sciences, a lot of people don't think about operations, right? They think about it later on. And I guess I was fortunate enough earlier on where I had that comparison like made directly in front of me. Like, you can go to the lab, or this is what you do in operations, right? It was a whole world that I didn't know about. So if you're interested and you're excited about it and this is something that you're into, I mean, I think if you ask any leader in operations of the organization you're going to be at, like, hey, I want to do something in manufacturing, like, can I get in there? They would love to throw you on a shift, or love to have you collaborate with some folks that are doing hands-on manufacturing so you can understand from a shop floor kind of perspective what's going on there, right? It's really interesting to have that, and you don't have to leverage a lot of your time to kind of get that experience, and it'll help you in the long run for sure.
Wow, that's great advice. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us today, Jeff.
My pleasure. Thanks, Nico. Have a great one.